Hey, how's it going? It's the Slayer here. Today we are back to my Bloodborne playthrough, and at the last video we had pretty much ended at Rom the Vacuous Spider, and after that I went through Unseen Village and took out some hordes of enemies and people who respawn them, and the boss at the end was pretty easy. The One Reborn. I'll show it to you a bit later in this video. I first time that, so that was fine. And then I progressed to some cool optional areas. So I've started this video here with, which is probably the best boss fight I've had in Bloodborne so far, in terms of probably the hardest one. Like, I still have to do the final two bosses and the DLC, but other than them, this was pretty much the hardest on my PS4. It was a bit slower or stuttery than this recording looks like, but it took me a while to get the timing on this one right, and once I did, it wasn't bad. Now, some of those charges like that are pretty hard to dodge on PS rather than on a newer console or the PC. But once I got the hang of this fight and its moves, it was pretty interesting. So because some interesting hitboxes there. And yeah, I've seen people often rage against this boss, and I tried everything. At the end of the day, I came up with my own tactic. I kind of liked using the Blade of Mercy on this boss, though I know that they say she's weak to bolt damage. I had tried that, and she is also weak to fire damage, although that's not known. That I initially threw an oil urn and then I put an axe on fire, and I nearly got her. But then I said, let me try something new. So I wanted to do this match with the Blade of Mercy. And it took some effort, because I ended up having to level up a bit, because initially I think I was playing for pretty long, so it was a bit slow. Then it became okay, but it took me a while to practice the dodge timing for this boss. And once I did, I kept on getting close, and all of a sudden, you'd end up getting an unnatural camera angle, or stuck in the corner, or just get hit by the laser attack. But once I figured out how to dodge everything, then it was a matter of patience. And just to give myself some comfort, I actually went and leveled up a bit more to face this boss. But surprisingly, when I came back, this boss became even harder. That was just some random RNG. I'm like, hey, I just leveled up and all that, and I nearly beat you before I leveled up. So that was funny, but in the end it wasn't bad. It was a good, like, I wouldn't say this was like Nameless King or Midir, or it was but it was, probably, at least in my view, though I know different people have different... Oh, wow, that's a crazy laser move. Yeah, that was fun. So different people have different opinions on what is the toughest bosses or not, but in my view, at least in the base game, prior to facing Margot's Wetness and German, this was probably the toughest one I'd faced. But yeah, it was good fun in the end once I figured out a way. Because yeah, I know that there are different ways where if you invested in the certain stats, you can probably use a glass cannon or the gun to stun this one and just keep on looping that. But I tried that, but with just 22 blood, that didn't really work. And then yeah, so I just I was keen to really hack this up with the Blade of Mercy, and that actually took some timing, because this boss is pretty fast. So being able to dodge that and with a dex weapon and circle her was something. I guess I've still got my Dark Souls habits, but I enjoyed using the rally mechanism to recover some health so that I could keep on attacking this boss. So in the end, it was a good experience, but it probably took me a few more attempts than it should. But I pretty much enjoyed this, and this is an optional boss, by the way. So this optional boss is accessible after a really funny cartoony alien like Celestial Emissary boss right here, who is also accessible in an optional Upper Cathedral Ward area. Because after I realized I just have two bosses left, and I'll shortly pick up the DLC, I wanted to finish off any optional areas and as many of the Chalice dungeons that I could. So then at the end of the optional area, I came up with this really funny boss fight, and I'm like, of course, the first time I would have been pretty embarrassed if I lost to a group of babies. But yeah, this was really funny. This seems more like something that would be like in a Pinocchio or a kid's story or Lies of P and all that. Yeah, true. But yeah, what's with the name Lies of P? What is that? What your pathology didn't tell you? I don't know. But yeah, so yeah, nice environment, but really pretty funny childish boss fight. So we did this before. You've got to then jump through a window here to access a lift that takes you down to that Ebrietas fight that I just showed you. So yeah, that was pretty cool. Yeah, you got to break this window to enter that. Yeah, wow, that sounds like a 90s action star giving you guidance that, oh yeah, you got to go break that window. And here we are. Bloodborne has got a pretty compelling lore. I need to get into it and all that, and a part of it is also involves motherhood, the sacrifices women make and whatnot. And this, I guess, this this visual or this appearance of I don't know, is it the spectre or something of that old queen is pretty compelling to probe into. And here I was just testing that, the camera pan that you can do with a controller while I was at that famous CUMMFPK Chalice dungeon where you can really farm, blood echoes / runes, as you can see from that 8 million figure over there. Yeah. So that's pretty good. So this is that dungeon I mentioned last time. So I used that to, after I beat around half or a little over the game, I wanted something quicker to level up. So then I just came to this dungeon. But yeah, nice camera angles with the controller, by the way. So, yep. And this is what you do in this dungeon. You just reawaken using Hunter's Mark and you keep on mining that. And yep, and here I was at the Unseen Village where, I faced off against 3 of the hunters that you meet prior to that One Reborn boss. And this was, just before that when I had just one left. I did make a mess of some of those fights, but yeah, that was pretty funny. And that area there is one where the enemies keep on respawning because there are a lot of hidden summoners over here whom you need to take out. So that was quite a fun stretch to get through. And now I have some fun with the last hunter because I didn't quite have the stats, but I wanted to see that if I use the gun, can I keep him in a perpetually stunned state instead of taking the visceral or critical hit? What if I just keep on shooting him? But eventually, yeah, I had to stick to my usual tactics. But this was fun. I just thought I'll toy with him a bit, and here we go. Once he turns up, I'm like, bang! Whoops, the whip. He always gets me. Yeah. So yeah, that was funny. Yeah, I just kept on shooting him and all that. But I don't have enough stats on blood to actually, and maybe this is just the level 3 or 4 handgun. It needs to be a little higher, along with more investment in blood to, heavily stagger, like consistently stun enemies or whatnot. But yeah, because I know some people did that on Ebrietas or Amygdala, though that didn't work for me. But yeah, Amygdala I had shown you in my last one, and this is fun and all that. Just watch what happens, and yeah, hate his whip and all. At one stage he says ow. I'm like, bitch, you're the one with the whip and you're saying ow. So I'm like, yeah. So yeah, that is quite funny. But yeah, let's see what happens when we get there. And oh yeah, I think that was the one. He's like, ow. I'm like, yeah, really? Yeah, that was funny. So yeah. Yep, I hope. And yeah, this is that One Reborn fight which you can access after going through an unseen village area, which you may have also previously been able to breeze through a bit if you had you're taking the shortcut to that Hypogean Gaol. So this fight is pretty simple. There's 6 summoners on top. You just got to finish them so that they don't respawn whatever the fuck this is. And then, yeah, you can take this out whichever way you want. Just avoid the foot stomping. So, yeah, that was an interesting boss. Not too bad, but yeah, I guess probably like a easier gimmick boss, compared to like Yom in Dark Souls 3 or something. But yeah. So yep, and this is where I first got some actual stutter or stagger in the video. Otherwise, normally it's still run pretty good, though at times I thought some visuals could be better. And from here you move on to the Nightmare of Mensis. That was quite a really a cool map, pretty well designed. And I really like that map, though I have mixed views on that boss of that area, which I'll tell you later. So unlike the Nightmare Frontier where we met Amygdala in the last video, which was optional, the Nightmare of Mensis is mandatory in your story progression. And it's a pretty interesting map where you avoid frenzy, you run through past a few beasts, including guys who are throwing stuff to get into a building, and the boss is deep inside the building. So initially I didn't find any lamp, so I said, oh shit, you've got to run all the way. But then I found out there is this lamp or site of grace, underneath, accessible via door underneath the building. And later on, you come across this lift which can directly take you to the boss fight, so you don't have to clear those 2 levels with the hunters like this guy and some other people who are around that area. So that's pretty cool. And it turned out that area even has another lift which can later take you to another boss that you would eventually have to face after clearing this area and some other optional stuff at top. So, yep, not my best work this one, but it actually kind of worked out. I'm backing away instead of thrusting forward because this is the first time I'd faced this guy. I wanted to see how strong he is. So, and here we are, like a gunfight at the OK Corral as I was just progressing upstairs. And again, I didn't know how strong this enemy is, so I thought, let me have some fun with the gun. So I just kept on shooting him to try and see that, can I stun them? Even if you, like normally in order to stun them to do the visceral, you got to time the parry just before they attack. So sometimes I do that, but this guy had some poison that pushed me back. But here I was trying to see what happens if you just keep on randomly shooting at them, So maybe if I invest more in blood or power up the gun, can I just survive on randomly shooting them? But yeah, instead of using the gun for the parry. So yeah, that was interesting. But anyway, there are lots of these NPC hunters. I've got to figure out the lore. And that's a cool move. That's the one that a boss does later. So yeah, that was pretty interesting. And then yep, and then we progress further up this area, and yeah, nice views and nice architecture, by the way. And this is a quick segue back to the unseen village, just to show something I like to do. I put up a shorts clip on this, and also flagged it as "and still." I did that in Dark Souls 3 as well. I love sneaking up on those enemies and just taking them out. And here it was, one of the dumbest bosses I've seen in Souls gaming history. Micolash, host of the Nightmare. Wasn't a bad boss, it felt, but more like something out of a children's story or something that would be in Lies of P, where you got to chase him around. He keeps on vanishing through mirrors, and eventually he comes in this room, and you can end up getting him locked in, and you can jump into this room through a hole so that he doesn't run off anywhere, and then you fight him. So that isn't bad. But in the earlier fight, he keeps on running around and vanishing, and in between you got to fight other skeletons as well. So I don't know, it was an alright fight, but it dragged on a bit too long because I didn't look this up. So until I figured out that he eventually gets locked in this room, and you can jump in and just finish it off. But it felt more like something that would be probably better in like Lies of P or Pinocchio or some children's story or something, but I don't know. So it didn't quite feel Souls-like, but yeah. So it was a pretty good experience on the whole. So now we just have two bosses, the final two bosses, and the DLC left, and I'm really enjoying the architecture and the setting and the gameplay style of Bloodborne. So yeah, really looking forward to the rest of the remaining videos, and I guess that next time I just explored some pretty cool bosses in a Chalice dungeon, including one which reminded me of the Black Knight Assassin. And I really love the Chalice dungeons. Some of them have a bit of a Chandni Bar vibe going on, by the way. I'm like, hey, what's that about? So those are pretty good. And then, yep, so we've got those. And then hopefully next time I'll finish off Mergo and maybe German. But before I do German, yeah, I'll probably take a call on the DLC. I might pick that up and do that along with Mergo before going on to German. But yeah, it's been a great journey with Bloodborne so far, and great picking it up on PS4 and stuff. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this clip. Do let me know your comments, and feel free to share any questions and requests. Cheers. Thanks.